This time. Sir, is my slide visible now?
Yes.
Hello? Yeah, okay. So, good evening, everyone.
Yes.
Good evening, all the faculty members, speakers, and all the delegates who have joined in for today's session. Let me introduce myself. I am Jayesh Kasargod, working in Marketing Department of Alembic Pharmaceuticals. I take
Jayesh,
this
your screen is
opportunity.
not featuring. Jayesh, your screen is not featuring. Only
My screen
sharing.
is not visible.
Yeah.
1 minute. Okay, now is it visible, Umesh ji? Hello.
It is. Yeah. It is visible now. Okay.
Okay,
Carry
yeah,
on.
fine. So sorry for the interruption. I once again take this opportunity on behalf of Alembic to welcome you all in OrthoConnect program, which is an interface among orthopedicians for knowledge sharing. Now today we are going to have a very informative session on metabolic bone disorders, and for the same we have eminent speakers from Safdarganj Hospital, New Delhi. That is, first I'd like to introduce Dr. Rahul Grover, who is an MS Orthopedic and DNB Ortho, and is currently working in Central Institute of Orthopedics, VMCC, and as correctly said, Safdarganj Hospital, New Delhi. And for the same, for accompanying Dr. Rahul Grover sir, we have Dr. Dipesh Kumar sir, who is also an MS Ortho and DNB Ortho from Safdarganj Hospital, New Delhi. So both of these eminent speakers are going to speak on metabolic bone disorders. So without further ado, I would like to ask Rahul Grover sir to carry forward this session. Over to you, sir.
Hi everyone, I am Dr. Rahul Grover. So today we are going to have a discussion on metabolic bone diseases. First of all, it will be taken by Dr. Dipesh sir. He will be telling you the pathophysiology and more importantly the calcium and vitamin D metabolism. So over to you, Dr. Dipesh. Then I will take over for clinical features and treatment.
Sure, Dr. Rahul Grover. I'm going to share my screen. Just confirm it that it's visible or not.
Yes, it is visible. Voice is clear.
So it's visible now.
Yeah. Share screen is visible.
Shall I continue?
Start. Please start.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. So firstly, I would like to thank all the organizers to give us a chance to teach the orthopedic postgraduate students. So without any further delay, I'll start with the metabolic bone disease. So my talk is basically limited to the basics of the metabolic bone diseases and the various types of the bone diseases. So we will be discussing the various headings as followed. So firstly, we will discuss the minerals of the bone, calcium and phosphorus. We will discuss the hormones that affect these minerals, parathyroid hormone and calcitonin, and other regulating factors like vitamin D. Then we will discuss the basics of the rickets and osteomalacia and the various types of the rickets and osteomalacia. So firstly, calcium. So total body calcium is about 1 kg. So out of this 1 kg, only 1 gram is found in the plasma and the extracellular fluid. The most of it, in fact, all of it, 99 gram, it is stored in the skeleton system and the bones in the form of phosphate, carbonates, and the hydroxide. So basically, when we are measuring the serum calcium level, we are measuring this 1 gram and not this 99 gram. So this we are measuring the serum calcium level, which occurs in two forms. It is a non-diffusible form, which is bound to the albumin, and then we have a diffusible form, which is ionized. So this is the ionized form serum calcium, which we are measuring. So this major part is used in the skeleton system, but rest of the ionic form, it is used in the coagulation, neuromuscular, and the other muscular contraction. So calcium is absorbed from the small intestine, and this absorption depends upon the vitamin D, parathyroid hormone, and calcitonin. Plus the acidity, it favors the absorption of the calcium, and the alkaline pH, it inhibits the absorption of the calcium. Excretion, it occurs by two ways, mostly by the kidneys and a part by the colon. Now this calcium, it filters through the glomerulus in the kidneys, and then it is reabsorbed. A part of it is reabsorbed from both the proximal and the distal tubules. Now this reabsorption further depends upon the vitamin D and the parathyroid hormone. So both in the absorption, vitamin D parathyroid has a role, and in the excretion, vitamin D and the parathyroid hormone has a role. So then coming upon to the second mineral, it is a phosphorus. So we have discussed that 99% of the calcium exists in the skeleton. So here the 80% of phosphorus, it is in the skeleton system. It is combined with the calcium to form the hydroxyapatite. So 20% of the rest of the phosphorus, it is in the bloodstream, and entirely 20% is the ionic form. So absorption of the phosphorus, it also occurs from the small intestine, and it depends upon the vitamin D pathway. And excretion occurs similar to the calcium through the it is filtered through the glomerulus, and most of it is reabsorbed in the proximal tubules. And this reabsorption again depends upon the parathyroid hormone, vitamin D, and the calcium. So serum levels, what we are measuring here is the ionic form, which is a 20% of the total phosphorus. It is 3 to 4 mg per deciliter. Now in the serum, these two, calcium and the phosphate ions, they exist in a ratio of 2.5 to 1 ratio. So this is known as a constant equilibrium. So this is in the serum. In the bone, they occur as a solid calcium phosphate. So these ions are in the constant equilibrium. So, and it follows the laws of dissociation, which means that if one decreases, the other will increase, and if one increases, other will decrease. So if there is an increase in the phosphate ion by any cause, it will cause the decrease in the calcium ion. How? It will cause the deposition of the calcium phosphate in the bone. And if there is a fall in the phosphate ion, it will cause the rise in the calcium ion by the withdrawal from the bone to maintain this equilibrium. Now coming upon to the hormones affecting this, all the minerals. First hormone is the parathyroid hormone. So we know that it is secreted by the parathyroid gland, which are located in the posterior aspect of the thyroid. So they maintain the serum calcium and the serum phosphorus level. So how it affects the serum calcium level? It increases the serum calcium by 3 ways. It increases the tubular resorption from the proximal and the distal tubules. It increases the absorption from the gut, and it increases the resorption from the bone. So these 3 pathways, through these, it increases the serum calcium level. Then it decreases the serum phosphorus level by inhibiting the tubular resorption. So there will be increased excretion of the serum phosphate and the serum of the phosphate ions, and the serum levels will decrease. So it causes increase of the serum calcium and decrease of the phosphate ions. So when there is a low calcium level by any cause of the serum, in the serum there is a low calcium level. So parathyroid secretion, it is automatically increased, and normal level will be restored by all these 3 pathways. And if there is a high serum calcium levels, then hypoplasia of the parathyroid gland will occur, and all the excess of the calcium will be deposited in the bone, and absorption through the gut is decreased by the parathyroid hormone. And phosphorus, we have discussed that parathyroid hormone, it increases the diuresis of the phosphorus by inhibiting the tubular resorption. So this is the parathyroid hormone pathway. So whenever there is a decrease in the calcium level, this will be sensed by the parathyroid hormone, parathyroid gland, which will cause the increase of the parathyroid secretion. So it will act on the, firstly on the kidneys. So it will cause the decrease in the serum phosphate level by increasing the excretion of the phosphate ions in the kidney by inhibiting their resorption. Plus it will act upon the kidney to increase the production of the active form of the vitamin D. This active form of the vitamin D will go to the small intestine and will increase the absorption of the calcium to increase the serum calcium level. And also this parathyroid hormone, it will go to the bone to increase the release of the calcium from the bone to increase the serum calcium level. So now we will discuss some of the pathologies of the parathyroid gland. So first is the primary hyperparathyroidism. So as the name indicates, it is a pathology of the parathyroid gland itself. So it will cause the increased serum calcium and decreased serum phosphate level, and there will be osteoclastic and the resorptive changes in the bone. And plus, because it has caused increased serum calcium level, in later stages it will cause hypercalciuria, and hyperphosphaturia it is already causing by inhibiting the resorption of the phosphate. Now, whenever there is a osteoclastic and resorptive changes, bone will try to recover it. So this will result in the increase in the bone forming marker, which is alkaline phosphate. So high levels of ALP will be seen in a primary hyperparathyroid patient. So another pathology of the parathyroid is the hypoparathyroid. So here the cause is most commonly is the accidental removal of the parathyroid gland while the thyroid surgery. So this will cause decrease in the serum calcium and increase the serum phosphate level, opposite to the hyperparathyroidism. So third pathology is the secondary hyperparathyroidism. So as the name indicates, it is a hyperparathyroidism. There is a increase in the parathyroid hormone, but the cause of the parathyroid hormone increase is not in the parathyroid gland. So here the cause is in the renal. So there is a renal disease which results in a glomerulus non-function. So whenever there is a glomerulus non-function, it will cause the decreased passage of the phosphatine into the kidneys. So decreased passage of the phosphatine in the kidneys will cause the increase of the phosphatine in the serum. So this will be sensed by the parathyroid gland. They will increase in the size and increase the production of the parathyroid hormone. So parathyroid hormone increase will cause the increase of the absorption of the calcium ion. They will increase the resorption of the calcium from the bone. So this serum calcium and the phosphate, they are increased, and further they are not excreted by the kidneys because there is a pathology of the kidneys already. So these all of the excess minerals, they will get deposited in the soft tissues, joints, blood vessels and kidneys. So this is a pathology of the renal pathology which is causing increased hyperparathyroid function. So this is similar pathway is also seen in renal osteodystrophy patients, where the cause lies in the renal. Cause is in the renal. So in blood we will see a high amount of the serum phosphate level, and while the calcium level it is either normal or it is a low calcium level. Marked acidosis is seen. Secondary enlargement of the parathyroid gland is seen. Metastatic calcium deposits because of the excess of the calcium, because of this increased absorption, and plus finally we have a renal rickets because of the resorption from the bone by the parathyroid hormone. Now second hormone to discuss here is the calcitonin. It has a function which is opposite of the parathyroid hormone. So it decreases the serum calcium level and it increases the serum phosphate level. So it inhibits the osteoclast mediated bone resorption. So it will cause a decrease in the serum calcium level and an increase in the serum phosphate level. So it is secreted by the C cells in the perifollicular areas of the thyroid gland, and it has a hypocalcemic effect, which is a counter to the hypercalcemic effect of the parathyroid hormone. So there is a balance of the parathyroid hormone and the calcitonin which occur in the body, which maintains our serum calcium level. So after discussing the hormones, we will shift to the other regulating factors. Now, in the other regulating factors, the most important is the vitamin D. So this is a pathway of the vitamin D through which the active form of the vitamin D will be formed. So in our skin, there is a sterol which is present, which is 7-dehydrocholesterol, which is normally present in our body. So under the influence of the sunlight, UVB lights, it is converted to a cholecalciferol, which is known as vitamin D3. Plus, through the diet, we can take vitamin D2 in the form of supplements. So this vitamin D3 and D2, it reaches the liver, and first hydroxylation occur to form the 25-hydroxy vitamin D3. Then this product reaches the kidneys to take place in the second hydroxylation to form the active form of the vitamin D3, which is 125-dihydroxy vitamin D3. So this active form will maintain the calcium balance in the body. So this is again the same pathway. So we have a 7-dehydrocholesterol in our skin, which is acted upon by the sunlight to convert to the cholecalciferol, and we take vitamin D2 from the diet. So these two reaches the liver to form the 25-hydroxy vitamin D. Then this product reaches the kidney to form the active form, which is the 125-dihydroxy vitamin D. So this active form will cause the calcium absorption, bone resorption and formation, calcium reabsorption from the kidney, and decrease of the parathyroid hormone synthesis. In net, it will cause the increase of the plasma calcium concentration. Now we will discuss how these all minerals, hormones, and other regulating factors, they are influencing and causing the rickets and osteomalacia. So rickets is basically a failure of mineralization. So we have discussed the minerals, calcium and phosphate. So this normal mineralization of the osteoid tissue in the bone and cartilage, this fails to cause the rickets. So rickets is basically a disease of growing children where both bone and epiphyseal cartilage is affected. And osteomalacia is the similar to the rickets, but it occurs in adults and individual where growth in height has ceased. So we have, this is the nomenclature which we discuss. So we have the broadly two type of the rickets. So one is the vitamin D deficient rickets and other is the vitamin D resistant rickets. So here the pathology is in the vitamin D deficiency. So what can be the cause of the vitamin D deficiency? It can be either nutritional, which is the primary dietary deficiency, or it can be a secondary cause, which is the malabsorption. That means the patient is taking a normal amount of the vitamin D, but there is some malabsorption syndrome, which is causing deficiency of the vitamin D and the calcium. Second is the vitamin D resistant rickets. Here, the vitamin D levels are normal and they are not deficient. So it is further of three types depending upon which pathway in the body is causing rickets. So first is the vitamin D dependent. So it is a part of the vitamin D resistant rickets, but it is a abnormality of the vitamin D pathway. So it is of two types, which we'll be discussing further. So second is the renal rickets. Here the cause, it lies in the renal kidneys. Third is the hypophosphatemic rickets. Here the cause, it lies in the phosphate pathway. So we have classified broadly into two types, vitamin D deficient and vitamin D resistant rickets. In vitamin D deficiency, we have two types. We have the primary, which is a dietary deficiency, and we have secondary, which is a malabsorption syndrome. And in vitamin D resistant rickets, we have three types. If the pathway involved is the vitamin D pathway, it is a vitamin D dependent rickets. If the pathway is in the renal pathway, it is a renal rickets. And if the pathway involved is the phosphate pathway, leading to the hypophosphatemic rickets. So starting with the nutritional rickets. So we have a vitamin D deficiency because of any cause, which will result in a low calcium absorption. So this will cause a moderate hypocalcemia. So this moderate hypocalcemia, it will cause further secondary hyperparathyroidism, which will try to replenish the serum calcium level. So it will cause a bone calcium resorption. It will increase the calcium absorption. It will increase the vitamin D synthesis. And plus we know that parathyroid hormone, it causes the decrease in the serum phosphate level by increasing the excretion of the phosphate. So in total, we will see a normal calcium level and a decreased phosphate level. So whenever a patient presents to us with the nutritional rickets, we usually find a normal calcium level, even if there is a calcium deficiency. So we should not fix our thought process on the calcium, but we should look to the other tests like vitamin D test and the phosphate test. So calcium is most likely a normal, and phosphate can be low and it can be a normal also. Vitamin D is usually reduced in case of vitamin D deficiency. Alkaline phosphate and parathyroid hormone, as we have discussed, because bone resorption is increased, which will lead to the increase in the formation of the bone, which will increase the bone forming markers, and it will cause the increase in the parathyroid hormone. So these are the two differentiating feature between the calcium deficiency rickets and the vitamin D deficiency rickets. So them are same cells. Only the vitamin D is normal in calcium deficiency rickets, but vitamin A, 1 is a vitamin D deficiency rickets. Rest all the blood tests will show the normal calcium level. So this is the differentiating feature between the calcium deficiency rickets and the vitamin D deficiency rickets. So starting with the will be similar in both cases. Then coming upon to the secondary deficiency, which is a malabsorption. So it can be because of any cause. It can be because of liver disease, bile acid defects, cystic fibrosis, or any pancreatic deficiency, celiac disease, or Crohn disease. Or it can be post-surgical after intestinal resection. Or it can be a decreased hydroxylation in the liver. So we have discussed that a part of vitamin D pathway occurs in the liver, which will result in a hydroxylation, decreased hydroxylation in case of liver pathology. So this will result in a decrease in the vitamin D and causing the secondary deficiency of vitamin D. Or there can be increased degradation of the vitamin D. Now we have discussed the nutritional rickets and the secondary rickets. Now we will shift to the vitamin D resistant rickets. So in vitamin D resistant rickets, first is the vitamin D dependent rickets, in which the pathway involved is the vitamin D pathway. So it is of two types. So it is an autosomal recessive type of the pathology. So in type 1, the enzyme involved here is the kidney. So this 1-alpha hydroxylase was the enzyme which was causing hydroxylation in the kidneys. So this enzyme is deficient. So this will cause the first type of the vitamin D dependent rickets. While in the second type, there is a pathology of the receptors. That active form of the vitamin D is formed, but it is not able to act upon on the receptors because there is a mutation in the receptor. So this will cause in type 1, we will see a low form of the active rickets because the pathology is in the kidneys and normal level of the 25 hydroxy vitamin D. So this 25 hydroxy vitamin D is not converted into the 125 hydroxy vitamin D. So this will be increased and this will be decreased. While in case of the type 2 of the vitamin D dependent rickets, there is a pathology of the receptors. So this will cause the increased amount of the this will cause increased amount of the active form, which is not able to act upon the receptors. So this is a type of vitamin D dependent rickets. So this will again elaborate it more. So we know that nutritional rickets is it because of the lack of the sunlight or dietary deficiency. So after cholecalciferol is formed with the help of skin and the ultraviolet light, this cholecalciferol was converting into the 25 hydroxy vitamin D3 in the liver, and it is converted into 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3 in the kidneys. So in the kidneys, this enzyme is deficient in the type 1 of the vitamin D dependent rickets, and this active form then further acts upon all the intestine, bones, and the kidneys. So these receptors are deficient in case of the type 2 of the vitamin D dependent rickets. Then coming upon to the renal rickets. So we are discussing basically vitamin D resistant rickets. So we have discussed the vitamin D dependent ricket, in which pathology was in the vitamin D pathway. So here the pathology is in the renal, in the kidneys. So it can be either, the pathology can be either in the glomerulus or it can be either in the tubules. And plus it can be either congenital or acquired. So in the renal rickets, we have divided into two types. In type 1, there is a phosphate retention because the pathology is in the glomerulus. So when the pathology is in the glomerulus, the serum phosphate won't come into the kidneys. So this will cause increased amount of the serum phosphate level. There will be a phosphate retention. And in the second type, it is a phosphorus loss because it is a disease of the tubules. In tubules, the resorption of the serum phosphate was occurring. So if there is a disease of the tubular system, it will cause increased excretion of the phosphate. So there will be decreased amount of the serum phosphate level. So first is the renal disease with the phosphate retention, which is a glomerulus disease. And second is a renal disease with the phosphate loss, which is a tubular disease. So this phosphate loss renal disease is of two types further. which is a renal tubular acidosis, and hereditary, which is a Fanconi and the Dent syndrome. So we will discuss it one by one. So first is the phosphate retention renal disease. So this is also known as renal osteodystrophy, and we have already discussed it under the secondary hyperparathyroidism. So we know that the glomerulus is non-functioning here, which will cause the increase of the serum phosphate level, increases the parathyroid hormone, and it increases the absorption of the calcium and the resorption of the calcium from the bone. So this will cause the osteoclastic changes in the bone. And plus this calcium and the phosphate, they are not excreted by the kidneys because they are already non-functioning. This will cause the deposition of the calcium and phosphate in the soft tissue, joints, walls, and the kidneys. So there will be high amount of the serum phosphate and low or normal level of the serum calcium. Alkaline phosphate is increased. Parathyroid hormone, we have discussed, it is increased. There will be secondary enlargement of the parathyroid gland and metastatic calcium deposits. So this is basically renal osteodystrophy, which is same to the secondary hyperparathyroidism. And this is a disease of the renal with the phosphate retention. Then we have a disease of renal system with the phosphorus loss, which is a tubular disease. So in first, we have a renal tubular acidosis. So there is a impaired tubular transport, which will cause failure of the hydrogen ion and acidify the urine. Plus there is a loss of the resorption of the phosphorus in the urine from the tubules. This will cause the increase in the loss of the phosphorus in the urine and the low levels in the serum with low and normal serum calcium level. So basically there is a tubular impairment which will cause the acidification of the urine because inability of the excretion of the hydrogen ion. Plus there will be retention of the phosphate in the serum because there will be a excretion of the phosphate because of the inability to reabsorb the phosphorus from the tubules. So this is the one part of the pathology. Plus because there is a disease of the renal, there will be a deranged vitamin D metabolism. So this, because we have discussed that a part of the vitamin D pathway, it occurs in the renal. The final hydroxylation, it occurs in the kidneys. So there will be deranged of the vitamin D metabolism. This will cause decreased gut absorption of the calcium. So because this is a tubular disease, so it can be also associated with hypokalemia, and plus there is a nephrocalcinosis and nephrolithiasis is also associated with the renal tubular acidosis. So a part of it is a hereditary, which is a Fanconi syndrome. Here the renal tubules, other than failure to absorb the phosphate, they fail to absorb the glucose and the amino acids. So there is increased excretion of the glucose as well as the amino acids in the urine. And the second is the Dent disease, which is X-linked disorder, which is a mutation in the gene coding for the chloride channel expressed in the kidneys. So these are all important for theoretical purposes. So in Dent disease, we find a hematuria, nephrolithiasis, nephrocalcinosis, and plus rickets and chronic renal failure will be seen. So by now we have discussed vitamin D resistant rickets. First we have discussed vitamin D dependent rickets, where the pathology was in the vitamin D pathway. Then we have discussed the renal rickets, where the pathology was in the kidneys. And in kidneys, we have discussed two pathology, where the pathology is in the glomerulus, which will cause the phosphate retention. And the second, the pathology was in the tubules, which will cause the phosphorus loss. Now, third in the vitamin D resistant rickets is the hypophosphatemic rickets, where the pathology is in the phosphate pathway. So any pathology in the phosphate pathway will cause the decrease in the phosphorus levels in the serum. So it can be either a familial, which is most commonly X-linked, but some of the familial are autosomal dominant and autosomal recessive. So in all of these, there is some pathology in the phosphate pathway, which is beyond the scope of this talk. So there are various enzymes in the phosphate pathway. So there is mutation of all the enzymes and the various enzymes in all these disorders. And the fourth is the hereditary hypophosphatemia rickets, which also presents with the hypercalciuria. So these are a part of the familial hypophosphatemia rickets. And the second is the secondary hypophosphatemia. If the patient is taking some phosphate binding antacids, which will cause the phosphate depletion and the osteomalacia further. So this is a hypophosphatemic type of the rickets. One is the familial and second is the secondary. Now, another similar to sound is the hypophosphatasia. So there is no pathology of the phosphorus pathway, but in fact, there is a pathology of the alkaline phosphate levels. So this is an autosomal recessive type of the disorder in which the alkaline phosphate levels are very low. It will present as rickets and also osteomalacia also, but there will be low of the alkaline phosphate levels. So this is important to discuss because of the similar sounding name to the hypophosphatemic. So, but there is a this is hypophosphatasia where there is a decrease of the alkaline phosphate. So by now we have covered all the type of the rickets. So, but whenever the patient present to us in OPD, we will order all these tests, and our diagnosis will be more of a retrospective diagnosis. From the levels of the various tests, we can retrospectively go to our diagnosis. So we have discussed that hypophosphatemic rickets, which is a type of the vitamin D resistant rickets. In it, there is a pathology of the phosphate pathway. So this will present as a decrease of the phosphate and increase of the alkaline phosphate. In nutritional, we have discussed there is a vitamin D deficiency. This will present as a decrease of the calcium and phosphate. And plus in vitamin D deficiency, vitamin D will be decreased. Parathyroid hormone and alkaline phosphate will be increased. Then we have discussed vitamin D dependent rickets in type 1. We know that active form of the vitamin D is decreased. And in type 2, the active form is increased because mutation is in the receptors. Hypophosphatasia, we have just discussed. It is a disorder where there is a decreased, very low amount of the alkaline phosphate. And calcium and phosphorus, they are increased. Renal osteodystrophy or the secondary hyperparathyroidism. So we have discussed that there is an increase of the parathyroid hormone, which will cause decrease of the serum calcium and increase of the serum phosphate level. It will be increased. And primary hyperparathyroidism, which is most commonly a adenoma. So we have discussed there will be increase of the phosphate level, and it will increase the calcium level, and it will decrease the phosphate level. So here the phosphate is increasing because it is a disease of the renal, which is causing the inadequate filtration of the phosphate in the kidneys. So this will cause the phosphate retention. But here the phosphate is decreasing because primary pathology is in the parathyroid gland, and it acts to cause the increase of the serum calcium and decrease of the serum phosphate. So this is again a elaborate of all the various types of the rickets, but we have discussed the basic crux of all the rickets. So that was all from my side. Now I will call Dr. Rahul to continue further.
Thank you, sir. It was a great presentation. I think you handled it pretty nicely, the complete pathway of vitamin D and calcium. In fact, I have also learned a lot of things by your presentation. I hope everyone in the participants got their chance to learn this. So now I'll go ahead with my presentation. In this, we are mostly discussing metabolic disorders, mainly rickets, and a few things about the others, what we see in OPD. the radiological part, the clinical part, and the treatment part. And I think all the biochemistry part has been touched by sir by discussing the metabolic pathways. So I'll make it short for you guys, and I will try to make as interesting as possible. Okay, so let's start. Is screen visible to everyone?
Yes, yes. Dr. Rahul, it's visible.
Okay, great. So I am Dr. Rahul Grover. I am from Safdarjung Hospital. Uh, we are discussing metabolic bone disease. सर का भी presentation काफी सही था और I hope यहाँ पे सब majority जो है orthopedics PG है. इसमें Mankin Article 1 and Mankin Article 2 are two classical articles which are described for orthopedic PGs to learn them by heart. तो मेरी आप सबसे एडवाइस रहेगी कि इस प्रेजेंटेशन के बाद आप लोग वापस जाके मैनकिन 1 और 2 को पढ़ लें और वो पढ़ना काफ़ी आसान हो जाएगा ये प्रेजेंटेशन सुनने के बाद. जिसके पास में मैनकिन आर्टिकल है वेरी गुड, जिसके पास नहीं है वो मेरे को मेल कर देना info@groverorthopedics.com. ठीक है, so I'll just mail you back the articles. So let's go with the disclosure first. First, there is no commercial interest in this presentation, and this is purely an educational activity for the postgraduate students in the absence of regular classes at medical college right now. This platform has been provided by Alembic Pharmaceuticals for promoting our regular teaching activity during COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you. So, metabolic bone diseases. First of all, we'll discuss rickets in detail. So what is rickets? First of all, what is bone? Bone is composed of two things mainly. First is extracellular matrix and another is cells. So what cells do the bone have? So first is it is osteoblast, osteoclast and osteocyte. And what is the extracellular matrix? It is the osteoid and calcium phosphate or hydroxyapatite. So normally there is a continuous process of bone resorption and formation which maintains a balance, and there is mineral content in the bone which remains relatively constant. So this happens normally, balances out each other. There is growth and mineralization of bone are influenced by a variety of factors which are as follows. Number one, level of growth hormone which is secreted by pituitary, calcitonin secreted by thyroid. There is parathormone, that is parathyroid from parathyroid gland. It also depends upon your dietary intake as well. Then there is something by intestinal absorption, calcium, vitamin D, phosphate, everything gets absorbed by your intestine as well. And there is urinary excretion. If you are excreting more, absorbing less, obviously you are going to have less amount of them inside your body. So this is a flow chart or telling you the composition of the bone, matrix and cells. So cells, there are four: osteoprogenitor, osteocyte, blast and clast. Matrix is of two types: organic matrix and inorganic matrix. Organic matrix has got collagen, non-collagenous proteins and mucopolysaccharides. Whereas in inorganic, it has calcium and phosphates. So metabolic bone diseases is broadly divided into two parts. अब दो चीजें हैं बोन में, one is matrix and another are mineral. So एक mineral की बीमारी हो जाएगी और एक matrix की बीमारी हो जाएगी. So the first thing is mineralopathy and the second thing is matrixopathy. So what are mineralopathy? So these are rickets, osteomalacia, hypophosphatasia, X-linked hypophosphatemia. And I hope these terms are not new to you now because Dr. Dipesh has handled all these terminologies very well in his presentation. Second is matrixopathy, which includes osteoporosis, scurvy, and hypophosphatasia. All right. And always remember, cells are predominantly affected in endocrine diseases. So this is showing you the balance between bone resorption and production. When you see the upper left, that is normal. This is normal, where bone resorption balances out with the bone production. So the resorption is balancing out with the production, maintaining the bone as it is, that is normal bone. Then there is osteosclerosis. In osteosclerosis, the bone production overtakes the resorption. So there is more production, so there will be sclerosis. And then there are two types of osteopenia. One in which there is more bone resorption. As you see the one on the left, there is more bone resorption. And the another thing is there is decreased mineralization. कि mineralization भी problem है, कि mineralize ही नहीं हुआ तो resorption की तो बात ही नहीं. ठीक है. Now we have some radiological modalities to find out that what type of thing is happening here. There is a way to measure this cortical thickness measurement. So as you see here, we take two cortices. The one on the left is AB, the one on the right is CD. So we'll make a combined sum AB plus CD, and this is called as circumference. AD is known as circumference of the bone. So this circumference से हम इसको divide कर देते हैं. So this should ideally come as this relationship, that these cortex should constitute at least half of the diameter of the total bone. So this is very simplest and most widely used method to evaluate bone density. Technical errors can lead to underexposure. Therefore, inspection should focus more on the cortical thickness than bone. Cortical thickness is directly correlated with the skeletal mineralization. As you see, when mineralization is less, there is thinning of the bone. आप देखा होगा osteoporosis में या rickets में बहुत ज़्यादा thinning हो जाती है bone की. Then preferred site is second and third metacarpal. कहाँ पे देखते हैं ये index जो हम measurement कर रहे हैं cortical thickness measurement, तो इसका preferred is second और third metacarpal. All right. Whereas in osteoporosis we get DEXA scan done, उसमें वो three sides होती है, neck of femur, wrist and your lumbar spine. Whereas in this method, cortical thickness measurement method, our preferred site is second or third metacarpal. Now you see this one on the left. This is normal. As you see, they've got pretty decent thick cortices. In mild osteopenia, there is thinning of the cortices, and in marked osteopenia, as you see, there's hardly any cortex. It's papery thin or papery thin cortex, wafer-like cortex. Now findings. Findings are osteopenia हो सकता है. Then there is something called as Wooser's zone, which is this term is used for osteomalacia. Now, what is rickets and what is osteomalacia? Rickets is something for children. Osteomalacia is the same thing that happens in adults, and obviously, rickets is a disease of growth. Therefore, there are more symptoms and signs in children because they are into the growing age as compared to adults. They have already grown. So osteomalacia is very subtle bimari. It usually gets diagnosed only after a patient comes with you with certain fracture. All right. Then there is widening of growth plate and flaring of metaphysis. All right. So this is something called as osteopenia. Osteopenia को we divide into three types: osteoporosis, osteomalacia, and hyperparathyroidism. In osteoporosis, there is deficient matrix and there is normal mineralization, whereas in osteomalacia, there is normal matrix and there is deficient mineralization. Whereas in hyperparathyroidism, there will be normal matrix and mineralization, but there is increased resorption. So अभी बात वही आ गई that we have discussed कि whether it's mineralopathy or matrixopathy, and then which pathway is overpowering the other, whether it's production overpowering bone resorption or bone resorption overpowering bone production, or there is already decreased mineralization. All right. So rickets and osteomalacia, it is characterized by incomplete mineralization of the bone osteoid tissue. Skeletal manifestation differ depending upon the age of the patient at the time of onset of the disease process, because I've already told you this is a disease of growth. So the earlier it sets in, there are more chances of signs and symptoms or more chances of devastation as compared to someone who is already grown. Then etiologies of vitamin D, etiology of rickets and osteomalacia. So first and foremost is the abnormalities of the vitamin D metabolism. So they include deficiency conditions like dietary deficiency, lack of UV light exposure, as you have already seen in the vitamin D pathway. Then there is absorption defects can be there, that is GI malabsorption, biliary atresia. Hepatic diseases is also one of the causes. Then renal insufficiency, which can lead to type 1 and type 2, vitamin D dependent rickets. Then anticonvulsant therapy is going on. Then there are other causes which are secondary to phosphate loss. So these are X-linked hypophosphatemia, primary hypophosphatemic rickets, this is acquired, and renal tubular acidosis, type 1 and type 2, renal tubular acidosis. Tumor associated rickets can also be there, and chemotherapy associated can also be there, which is associated with this drug known as isophosphamide. Sorry for the spelling here. Then there are miscellaneous causes like metaphyseal chondrodysplasia. It is specifically of this Schmidt type, and there is hypophosphatasia, Okay. Now we'll talk about the clinical manifestation of the rickets. As I've already told you, rickets is a disease of growth. उसका क्लिनिकल मैनिफेस्टेशन डिपेंड उसी बात पे करेगा कि इन विच फेज ऑफ ग्रोथ द पेशेंट इज. जितना जल्दी पेशेंट को रिकेट्स हो जाएगा, द मोर प्रॉब्लम्स इन द growth plates they have, and the more symptoms or signs the patient comes with in the OPD. So infants in up to 6 months of age, the patient will come as listless, apathetic, crying like anything, irritable, hypotonia, and muscle weakness. As orthopedicians, we don't see such patients to us because these patients are moreover handled by pediatricians. Uh, but when they develop some deformities, they refer it to us. So a child 1 to 2 year old, this is important because at this stage pediatrician refers it to an orthopedician or pediatric orthopedician. This is here the patient will be shorter as compared to other kids of same age. He will have or she will have a lower body weight. There will be pallid skin or pale skin, or even if it is severe, anemia can also be there. Lax ligaments honge, which leads to laxity of the joints, and excessive sweating, particularly of head and face. So there is a history of saying that when I'm eating something, I have excessive sweating of head and the face. Then now we'll have a look on these things, on these findings from top to bottom of the body. First of all is the skull changes. So skull changes में आते हैं. Number one, softening of calvaria, known as craniotabes, and this leads to box-shaped skull. And why this box-shaped skull happens? Because the parietal bones, they are more soft as compared to others, and they becomes flattened out and giving it a shape of box, and this is called as craniotabes. Now this is very important for your practical exam as well. If they give you some case of deformity, and you diagnose it to be secondary to nutritional rickets or idiopathic rickets or whatever, in that case they will ask you, because it's usually a short case ricket, and they will ask you to enumerate all the findings from top to bottom in a child or in human beings. So all these findings should be on your tips. Then sutural diastasis, because there is decreased mineralization, and the sutures that is which are present in the skull, they will be diastatic. And then there is something called as hot cross bun skull. This is very important. This is actually a combination of these two findings. So hot cross bun skull is because what happens is there will be diastasis of the sutures, okay, and there will be thickening of the perisutural bone. So this bone is thickened, perisutural bone is thickened, and there will be diastasis of sutures. Sutures पूरे से fuse नहीं होंगे. So now this will look like a bun. जो हम हार्वेस्ट गोल्ड वगैरह के बनाते हैं वैसे ही बन लगेगा ये देखने में. So that is why it is called as hot cross bun skull. Then there is something called as frontal bossing. ये तो क्लासिकल है, सबको पता होता है frontal bossing. Then there is persistence of anterior and posterior fontanelles. So ये close नहीं होंगे. In rickets, if they are persisting, most common cause is rickets. If there are persistence of anterior posterior fontanelle, most common cause is rickets. अब उसके नीचे आ जाते हैं the dental changes. Dental changes, number one is delayed development of the teeth. Irregular pits and grooves are there on the tooth. There is enamel hypoplasia, and there are frequent caries in that child. So it is thorax changes. The first being rachitic rosary. This is very important, and in exam they ask you to differentiate between rachitic rosary from scorbutic rosary. In scurvy, it also has this rosary. So in rachitic rosary, this is usually tender, whereas in scorbutic rosary it is non-tender. Okay. Then there is something called as pectus excavatum or carinatum. Then there is Harrison's groove, because Harrison's groove ऐसे develop होता है because at the sites of insertion of diaphragm onto the lower hemithorax, because of the pull of the diaphragm and the bone is weakened out, so there will be a grooving. There will be grooving of the ribs or the thoracic cage. So this is called as Harrison groove. Then in severe cases, the patient can have chronic cough and pneumonitis and other metabolic changes that can happen secondary to that. Then comes the abdominal changes. Most important one being the rachitic port belly. So why does this happen? This happens because of the hypotonia of the abdominal muscles, and there will be visceropoptosis, that all the viscera they come out because of the lower tone of the abdominal muscle. Then second is rachitic cat back, that is because of the thoracic kyphosis. These patients also has waddling gait because of the coxa vara and with marked lumbar lordosis. So lumbar lordosis is marked in these patients, and scoliosis, although it is uncommon, but if present, it is very severe and it is progressive. We have seen a patient with scoliosis and rickets, and there were all the classical findings of rickets present, but it was complicated by scoliosis. So that was a very difficult case to handle. Limbs. So most of the times we come across limbs X-ray in these patients. So this is the most important thing that we have. If first of all being hypotonia of the proximal muscles of the upper limb and lower limb. Now, due to hypotonia of the muscles of lower limb, there will be postural problems, and uh, there will be problems in the gait as well. Now, angular deformities at elbow, wrist, hip, knee, ankle. So most of the times in exam, what we get a case of angular deformity of elbow or angular deformity of the knee. All right. Then there is increase in circumference of the elbow, wrist, knee, and ankle. So there is increase in circumference of these things because of what we call it. Yeah. And then there is rachitic saber shin. Shin also becomes there are differential diagnoses of the saber shin. What most common cause that we have already read is the syphilis, but there can be because of rickets also. Then there is coxa vara, which leads to waddling gait, and then there is something called as strings of pearl deformity. This strings of pearl deformity is because of the sausage-like deformity of the metacarpals and phalanges, and the constriction is made by the joint. Okay, so there is swelling or sausage-like deformity or swelling of the, if this is metacarpal and this is phalanx, but the constriction is made by metacarpophalangeal joint, and this is why it is called as strings of pearl deformity. There can be pathological fractures. So these are the findings that you see in the limbs, and then there is something called as paradox of the rickets. So paradox of rickets in rickets is a disease of growth, as we all know. With increase in severity of rickets as manifested by systemic involvement and deranged blood chemistry, there are paradoxical changes in epiphyseal plate, that is, they become milder or even disappear. All right. Biochemical profile, most of it was being covered by Dr. Dipesh sir. So I'll just cover it very fast. In rickets, serum calcium and phosphorus is normal to slightly decreased. In alkaline phosphatase is markedly increased. All right. Most of the times you see it is more than 50, and in our clinical practice we usually see around more than 300 to around 500. And urinary calcium is decreased, urinary phosphate is variable, but the percentage tubular reabsorption of phosphate, that is TRP, is less than 80%. All right. And what is the pathology? The pathology is the generalized demineralization of the skeleton. Cartilaginous cells at the growth plates, they grow normally, but they fail to calcify and they degenerate. There is growth plate is occupied by enlarged masses of overgrown cartilage. This is a normal diagram of growth plate. Now we'll firstly discuss the radiological findings of rickets. So the most common and non-specific finding is the osteopenia. Okay. Characteristic changes that occur at growth plate, that happens at growth plate. For the earliest lesion, distal and radius and distal ulna are the best sites for being ulna being more sensitive. This can be asked as a question by your consultants in OPDs, that when you look at a wrist X-ray, out of distal ulna or distal radius, which is more sensitive? We always have a thing for radius, so we always say, okay, sir, it should be distal radius when we are guessing if we don't know. But always remember, ulna is more sensitive than radius, because the thing is, of all the joints in the limbs, this being the least weight bearing. So of these two bones, ulna is lesser weight bearing. So that is why ulna becomes more sensitive to the changes. Because if changes are present in ulna, that means rickets is there. Because it comes earlier in the not weight bearing joints. Most active growth plates are costochondral junction of the middle ribs, distal femur, proximal humerus, both ends of tibia, and distal end radius of the ulna. Now there are characteristic changes at the long bones in the order of appearance. So the first thing is the widening of the growth plate. Then second comes the irregular metaphyseal margins, that is paintbrush metaphysis. Then there is widening and cupping of the metaphysis. There are irregular and indistinct borders of the epiphysis with delayed appearance and ossification centers. And there is rarefaction of the shaft. So as you see here, we have all the findings present here. Widening of the growth plate, as you see, there is widening of the growth plate. There is irregular metaphyseal margins, that is paintbrush metaphysis. Then there is widening or cupping of the metaphysis. There are irregular and indistinct borders of the epiphysis. Now epiphysis also has irregular and indistinct borders. Okay, and there is rarefaction of the shaft, as you see here. So all these things, rarefaction of the shaft is there, rarefaction of the shaft is there. So all these things are present in long bones. Now, what other skeletal deformities that we have? Skull, there will be squared configuration, which is called as craniotabes. We have already read. There will be bowing deformities can happen, as you see here in the tibia and fibula, that there are bowing deformities present. In ribs, there are bulbous enlargement of costochondral junction, that is called rachitic rosary. So this is the diagram showing rachitic rosary. So this is costochondral junction. You see there is swelling of the costochondral junction. Okay. Spine, they have scoliosis and vertebral end plate deformity. Then in pelvis, pelvis is more important and more sensitive in osteomalacia. So there will be triradiate configuration due to protrusion of hip. There will be protrusio stabili, and the patient can present to you with pathological fractures as well. Now, what are the signs of healing rickets? This is a very common question asked by our consultants or OPD. So signs of healing rickets are reappearance of dense zone of provisional calcification, that is transverse line, increase in cupping of healing metaphysis, recalcification of subperiosteal osteoid, sharply defined epiphyseal ossification centers. All right. So there is reappearance of the dense zone of provisional calcification, as you see here. Then there is increase in cupping of healing metaphysis. You see the cupping has increased of healing metaphysis. Then recalcification of the subperiosteal osteoid. I cannot mark it here. And there are sharply defined epiphyseal ossification center. Sharply defined epiphyseal ossification center. Similar is the picture here as well. This is also a picture of healing rickets. As you see, there is sclerosis of the metaphysis. Etiological consideration of rickets has already been described. There are various types of rickets by Dr. Dipesh sir. So we'll cover it very fast. Renal osteodystrophy is retention of phosphate, okay, and low levels of vitamin D3. So there will be bone resorption, and the classical thing about this in spine is the Rugger-Jersey spine. So what is Rugger-Jersey spine, and why do we call it Rugger-Jersey spine? So the jersey of this was alternating black and white, black and white. Okay, this was a rugby team. So as you see, there is sclerosis of the end plates, and there is osteolysis in between. So this is why it is called as Rugger-Jersey spine. So it looks like red band here, a black band, or whatever, high bone density. So this is what signifies Rugger-Jersey spine. All right. And in this case, you also have brown tumors, as you see here. These are the lytic lesions classically present in the hand. Lytic lesions classically present in the hand, here also present. Okay. Then there is hereditary vitamin D dependent rickets. It happens in early infancy. It's of two types: type 1 vitamin D dependent rickets and type 2 vitamin D dependent rickets. Type 1 is deficiency of renal 1 alpha hydroxylase, whereas type 2 is end organ resistance to 125 hydroxyvitamin D. So in this case, in type 1, the blood levels of 25 hydroxyvitamin D3 is normal, and because of 1 alpha hydroxylase deficiency, so 125 hydroxy D3 is decreased. So always remember that this is decreased, whereas this is normal. And there will be healing with physiological doses of 125 dihydroxyvitamin D. So this can be treated with normal doses of 125 dihydroxyvitamin D. Whereas in type 2, there is end organ resistance. So this is very severe rickets. There is growth retardation and alopecia. This cannot be easily treated because the problem lies at the receptor level. So this also this table summarizes what I have taught you just now in this slide. We move on to the next, that is secondary to phosphate loss, the other type of rickets, which is the X-linked hypophosphatemia. This is the most common form of renal tubular rickets, and there is impaired absorption of phosphate from proximal tubules. Okay. In this case, serum calcium is normal, phosphate is persistently low. Always remember to get all that metabolic profile that sir have shown you. These सारे टेस्ट कराने, calcium, phosphate, alkaline phosphatase. Okay, then only you will get a nice picture of what you are dealing with. Generalized increase in bone density in adults with ligamental ossification. As you see, there is ligamental ossification here on anterior inferior iliac spine. Okay, so this is X-linked hypophosphatemia. Then there is something called as hypophosphatasia. This is a rare genetic disorder. There is mutation in the gene that encodes tissue non-specific alkaline phosphatase. The problem lies in non-specific alkaline phosphatase. Okay, and this alkaline phosphatase is an inhibitor of bone mineralization. So there are 4 phenotypes: perinatal, infantile, childhood, and adult. So in perinatal, what happens is there is very poor mineralization. In infantile, there is craniosynostosis. Okay, and in childhood, there is tons of lucency that extend from growth plate to the metaphysis. And in adult, you see such kind of an X-ray is seen with that is called as metal beaten skull or copper beaten skull. If you look at the skull X-ray closely, it looks like as if you have beaten a copper. Okay. Then there is renal tubular acidosis, that is inability to acidify the urine properly. There are 2 types, although there are 4 types. We'll discuss here distal and proximal. That is type 1 is distal, type 2 is proximal. So in distal, there is continuous bicarbonate urea. So nephrocalcinosis is there in untreated cases, whereas in proximal RTA, there is phosphate urea plus glycosuria, amino acid urea and bicarbonate urea. Everything is there. This do not progressively accumulate acid, unlike in type 1, and rachitic deformities are uncommon in type 2. So rachitic deformities are more common in type 1 as compared to type 2. Okay. Now let's talk about the treatment very fast. Treatment in vitamin D depend. This table is being taken from Mankin article only. So in vitamin D deficient states, you give this vitamin D regimen 25 to 250 microgram per day, calcium 1 gram per day, and general nutrition, sunlight, etc. In absorptive defects where vitamin D reabsorption or metabolic problems were there, so in this case, you slightly increase the vitamin D dose to 37.5 to 625 microgram per day, or 1500 से 25,000 international unit per day, and calcium 1 to 2 gram per day. In vitamin D resistant rickets, you will have to give 20,000 to 60,000 international unit per day. All right, and 1 gram per day calcium you have to give, and you have to give neutral phosphate as well in this vitamin D resistant rickets of 1.5 to 6 gram per day. Whereas in proximal Fanconi syndrome, there is 25,000 to 40,000 international unit per day. And in proximal and distal, which include Fanconi syndrome, Lignac-Fanconi syndrome, in that case, you will also have to give similar dose. In renal tubular acidosis, you have to give 1,000 to 4,000 international unit per day of vitamin D. And in renal osteodystrophy, you have to give 20,000 to 2 lakh international unit per day. In this case, the patient has also have to get a dialysis done, and there is something called as which is very commonly asked by the examiners, what is STOS regime. So basically, when you are giving vitamin D, there are 2 regimens. One is daily regimen and another is STOS regime. In our setup, in our country or in any developing country where the compliance of the patient is poor, or you think that the parents of the patient won't be able to give him vitamin D daily, so here you give STOS regimen. In STOS regimen, what happens is you have to give 30,000 to 60,000 international unit of vitamin D, 30,000 to 60,000 of vitamin D in the single shot, and it is a one-time thing. And along you have to give calcium supplements. Whereas in day, if you are not giving STOS, you are doing it a daily vitamin D thing. So in daily regimen, as we have already discussed, it is 2000 to 5000. I'm just giving you an average as if it is given here 1500 to 2500 or 1000 to 10,000. So we are talking about vitamin D deficient states here. So on an average, it's 2000 to 5000 international unit per day if you are giving it on the daily regimen. And after that, you have to supplement by 400 international unit per day if the patient is less than 1 year, and it should be 600 international units per day if it is more than 1 year. So this is the therapy of vitamin D that you give. And in case of severe rickets, if the patient comes with symptomatic hypocalcemia, then you have to give, I'll use this plain page here. In case of symptomatic hypocalcemia, you have to give 100 milligram per kg के हिसाब से you have to give calcium IV, and IV calcium gluconate followed by oral calcium or calcium triol at the rate of 0.05 microgram per kg per day. So this is the IV calcium gluconate 100 milligram per kg in case of symptomatic hypocalcemia, followed by oral 0.05 microgram per kg per day of calcium. All right. So now we'll discuss what is the orthopedic treatment or surgical treatment of this patient. So this was the medical treatment that we have discussed. Orthopedic treatment, so that's for primarily the patient comes to you if he's being referred by a pediatrician for orthopedic treatment only. If the patient comes by itself to you, then you have to treat it by giving medical treatment yourself. In orthopedic treatment, most of the times that patient comes with you with the genu valgum or varum, cubitus varus or valgum. More commonly, they comes with this. So in this case, you have to correct the deformity by doing various types of osteotomy. We will not be discussing that today. We can have a separate discussion of osteotomies around the knee sometime later. Now we'll talk about osteomalacia. Osteomalacia, the diagnosis of osteomalacia is difficult because of its subtle nature. It is first diagnosed as Killian's pelvis, that is narrowing of pelvic outlet, and histologically it is identical to the rickets. Only moderately severe disease is symptomatic and poorly localized bone pains are there. Milkman pseudofracture or looser zones are there. So as we have discussed, it is very similar histologically to rickets, and usually the adult patient comes with bone pains and muscle weakness or generalized body pains. Radiologically, there will be osteopenia. There is coarse indistinct trabecular borders. There is thin indistinct cortex, pseudofracture or looser zone. So this is very important. This is pathognomic of osteomalacia. There is linear areas of unmineralized osteoid, bilateral and symmetrical distribution. And the sites are the axillary margin of scapula, as you have seen here. This is the axillary margin of the scapula, and there is pseudofracture. Okay, superior and inferior pubic rami, inner margins of proximal femur, posterior margin of proximal ulna, and the rib. So these are the sites where you can see these looser zones or pseudofractures. These fractures are usually oriented at right angle to the cortex, and these are considered as either insufficiency type fractures, also known as milkman fractures, or increment fracture, or bow zones. All right. So bony deformities that these patients have is protrusive stabili is very common, triradiate pelvis, and there is bowing of the long bones. Kyphoscoliosis can also be seen in these patients if they are young, and basilar invagination of the skull is also seen. On bony scintigraphy, it will be found to be more sensitive than blood biochemistry and radiographic findings in the detection of osteomalacia. So the typical features on scintigraphy include widening of the mandible, rachitic rosary as you see here. There is tie sign of sternum. This is tie sign of sternum. There is pseudofracture sign, and there is prominent epiphysis of the knee. So this is how a scintigraphy scan or bone scan of a patient with osteomalacia looks like. So now we differentiate osteoporosis and osteomalacia. Osteoporosis Here bones are porous and brittle, whereas in osteomalacia, Malaysia का मतलब ही soft होता है, ठीक है? So here bones are soft. Here porosis में there is thin and sharp trabeculae, and here there are coarse and indistinct trabeculae. There are no looser zones, and here looser zones are present. Osteoporosis, although it's a separate discussion, we can have it later sometime. So this is how osteoporosis looks like. As you see here, यहाँ पे if it's visible to you clearly, इसके trabeculae एकदम clearly thinned out and दिखाई दे रहे हैं. Where in osteomalacia, there is no such thing here. And for this thinning of trabeculae, we read something called as Singh's index, as you might have heard. Okay. Now rickets is over. We have discussed treatment part as well as the clinical part and radiological part. Now we'll firstly cover a very few other things. Scurvy is the closest differential diagnosis of ricket, associated with long-term deficiency of vitamin C, also called as ascorbic acid. This is called as Barlow's disease. Common in children aged 8 to 14 months. Clinical features being the spontaneous hemorrhage due to capillary fragility. There is spontaneous fatigue, bleeding gums, melena, or hematuria. There is joint swelling because of the bleeding inside the joints, pain, tendency to lie supine with high abducted, that is frog leg position. And there is pathological features like vitamin C is essential for formation of intracellular substances like collagen, osteoid, and endothelial linings. So radiological features very important. Number के हिसाब से mark दें पे. So first and foremost is osteopenia. Second, there is dense provisional zone of calcification, that is white line of Frankel, very important. So this you see, this is white line of Frankel. Then there is scorbutic zone or Trummerfeld zone. This is scorbutic zone or Trummerfeld zone. It is like sort of lytic zone, then less dense as compared to white line of Frankel. Then there are spurs. These are the spurs known as Pelkan spurs. There is a ring epiphysis also called as Wimberger sign. You see, it looks like a hamburger. So this is called as Wimberger sign. Then subperiosteal hemorrhages are also seen, and there is pencil thinned out cortex, as you see here. These are subperiosteal hemorrhages. That the periosteum looks separately because of that. So this is subperiosteal hemorrhage, as you see. The periosteum looks separate. This is scorbutic zone, also called as Trummerfeld zone, the lytic zone. This is dense zone of provisional calcification, white line of Frankel. This is ring epiphysis, and these are the Pelkan spurs. This is more of that is a clinical photo or X-ray of the actual patient, and this is more of for the depiction. Now there are signs of healing of scurvy. So all changes are reversible on therapy. A single growth arrest line may remain in metaphysis like this, and there are subperiosteal hemorrhage that rapidly calcify and demarcate. So this is not some tumor. So this can be given you as an X-ray as a spotter. So this is not a tumor. This is a healed subperiosteal hemorrhage which is present here. And you see there is a persistent growth arrest line present here in the distal part of the femur. Now we'll discuss hyperparathyroidism, which is of three types: primary, secondary, tertiary. In primary, most common cause of hypercalcemia होता है. Then parathyroid adenoma हो सकता है, hyperplasia, carcinoma, ectopic. There will be raised calcium level. This is important, and parathormone is decreased, phosphate. So calcium is increased, parathormone is increased, that is PTH is increased, but phosphate is decreased. So this is primary. In secondary, there is decreased calcium, there is phosphorus is high, and PTH is elevated. Whereas in tertiary, the parathyroid glands act independent of the calcium levels, so it is not related to this. Radiological features, subperiosteal